Yep.
2 seconds. Salic. I will do Salic. Yeah.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the July 16th council meeting to order. The council has been in an executive session on the second floor to discuss labor negotiations. We will now conclude that meeting and roll right into the city council meeting. So, good to see everybody. I'd like to please remind everybody to silence your cell phones if you haven't done so already, and please stand and join me in the invocation and the pledge. Lord, we come before you tonight in prayer for our country. Remind us that the freedoms that we enjoy in this country come at a cost. And also remind us that part of our system of government involves disagreement, passion, emotion, and energy, and different visions for our society. But also help us to remember that we're a civilized people and that there's no room for personal attacks, criticism, violence, attempted murder, and that we are civilized. Please remind us to engage in government in open and to debate, argue, back and forth in values that we envision, but that there's no place for personal attacks. We ask your blessings on our meeting tonight. Give us guidance and wisdom. We pray for all those in our city who are sick or suffering. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty. Thank you. It's good to see everybody. Welcome, gentlemen. So for those of you visiting with us, I think probably all of you here tonight know about this tradition, but if not, we start every one of our meetings with a fun or interesting fact concerning our city, its history, or the region that we live in. We rotate that duty, and tonight that duty falls on Councilmember Schistler, who I think has something interesting in store for us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm going to cheat a little bit this time, and I'm going to invite Mr. Alicassi up to the paramedic Alicassi up to the podium. He is our de facto historian for the fire department, and I've asked him to give the first 50 years of Temple Terrace Fire Department. A brief overview of the history. It's getting harder and harder to come up with some of these things, and we're going to, it's nice when we have somebody that can offer firsthand, not firsthand, but at least detailed knowledge of it. So, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. So it won't be the first 50 years. I had to shorten it to the first 25.
Okay, we'll go with
we
that.
We don't have 3 hours, so.
No, we don't.
No, we don't. No.
So, good evening, everyone. My name is Alicassi, firefighter paramedic here in Temple Terrace. I'm honored to present the fun fact of tonight's council meeting. So, today we know and love our modernized fire department as an internationally accredited and ISO 1 fire department. Status that only 121 fire departments hold in the nation. But how did we get here? Our journey began nearly a century ago, and today I'll take you through the first 25 years. So I think Ms. Mooney has a presentation or a PowerPoint that we can reference for pictures.
Somebody moved it. I can't get to it right now because somebody moved it on me. I can't get to it right now.
Okay, that's all right. So I came prepared. So
Somebody deleted it.
that's all right. I will send it to all of you so you can reference it.
Thank you.
In 1927, the Temple Terrace Fire Department was established with a modern budget, laying the foundation for what would become a pillar of our community today. The budget was about $200, so very different than what it looks like here today. The following year, in 1928, E.A. Fisher was appointed the first fire chief of the Temple Terrace Fire Department. He was an insurance agent, and he was very involved with Sulphur Springs and forming their fire department in the early 1920s. Though his role was initially more consultative, he set the stage for the department's growth. So, by 1937, our fire department acquired its first fire engine, which was a 1934 Ford fire truck that we got secondhand. And this early apparatus was equipped with a 35-gallon water tank and a lawnmower fire pump that they actually used to have to start with a pull cord. And that was actually hand-built by the volunteers at the time. In 1942, Basil Brook was appointed the fire chief. He was a professional golfer and prominent Temple Terrace resident. And under his leadership, the department saw significant reorganization and growth. In a Q&A done with Chief Brooks in 1943, they asked, is the old fire engine capable of starting quick enough and getting to a fire in time to put it out? His response was, yes. The old fire engine is in practically as good a condition as it was when the city first got it, and it starts as well as it did then, and also travels just as fast, 45 miles an hour. In 1944, the volunteer fire department reformed nearing the end of World War II, and it was after we got some new equipment and appointed key leaders such as George Jocelyn, Harry Roller, A.M. Shands, and Bob Nelms. In 1946, Larry Wardwell and his family moved to the city of Temple Terrace in July, and then in 1947, he assumed the roles of city manager, tax collector, fire chief, city clerk, city treasurer, and city purchasing agent. He's a man of many hats. Something I don't know if we could do today. We could try though, maybe. And then in 1949, I have a clip of one of our budgets, and it was $89.98. $89.98 is what was in the fire department's budget in 1949. In fiscal year 50, they did increase it to $542.75. So that would equate to about $6,931 with inflation today, is how big the fire department's budget was at the time. And then in the early 1950s and throughout the 50s, the department was marked with a significant period of development. The first headquarters was established at the intersection of Kingsway Drive and Sunningdale Avenue, utilizing the former Temple Terrace Country Club maintenance garage. The facility served as the training grounds for the volunteer firefighters, and that building was later demolished in the 80s. That's all I have. That's the first 25 years.
That's interesting. So when did, Alec, do you know when it became from volunteer to professional firefighters?
So in the early 70s, they did pay the first fire chief, and then they paid the first 3 firefighters. So later on, they got more and more people involved. We were still mostly volunteer throughout the 70s and 80s.
When
Yeah,
did
1972, I think, is the year that we had paid firemen.
when did we phase out volunteers? Do you know? Because I remember volunteer fire departments in the
so-
county.
Yeah, oh yeah, so that would have been, I think for us, sometime in the late 70s, because we had like a reserve program, which wasn't quite volunteer, but yeah, Luke's had a volunteer fire agency, Sefner Mango,
Yeah.
up until like the early 2000s, so it was sometime in the 80s.
Wasn't it after the shopping center fire that they went to fully
Oh, I don't
paid?
know.
When Cash and Carry burned, not Cash and Carry, but the
library?
Vermontos and Snooty Fox, huh?
Library.
No, it was before the library. It was before the library burned down. It was the shopping center where the old Publix used to be, when that fire. After that, I remember they went to, we're talking, oh God, 50 years ago?
Yeah.
I'll have to have you come back and do the second 50
Yes.
years.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes. Thank you,
Alright.
sir.
Cool.
Thanks,
Yeah, of
Alec.
course, thanks.
Thank you very much, Alex. Appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so first order of business is approval of the minutes from the July 2nd meeting. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Vice Mayor Abel, any corrections to the minutes? If not, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed? No nays. The minutes are adopted. Next are persons wishing to be heard on items not listed on the agenda. or items on the consent agenda. For those of you who may not be aware, we do have forms in the back of the room if you wish to address the council at this point in the meeting. I currently have 2 requests to speak. The first one is from Mr. John McCourty. Welcome, Mr. McCourty. Welcome back. Good evening.
First of all, thank you, Mayor Ross, for your benediction. I think in light of recent events, it's important for everyone to understand that everyone's voice needs to be listened to with respect, and that even if an opinion differs than your own, it still doesn't mean it was well thought out and comes from a good place.
Thank you, Mr. McCourty. I did neglect to tell you, we do need your name and city of residence at the beginning.
Oh, okay, my name is John McGordy, 5408 River Hills Drive.
Very good, thank you.
And I hope my comments follow that principle. I'd like to start, I'm here to talk about the sober house we talked about last time I was here. I'd like to start by responding to the lady who spoke right after me. She said that her daughter was an addict and claimed that people living in these sober houses are not necessarily bad neighbors. And that's 100% true. And I pray for her daughter's recovery and redemption. I, however, have had a totally different experience with family and addiction. It involved violence, restraining orders, the Baker Act, family division, stolen money, and heirlooms. I respectfully submit that if a person is unable or not allowed to live in your home, please don't ask them to live 10 feet from mine. 2 things have since happened that I think validate my and my neighbors' concerns. First, a reporter who heard my last statement called to interview me. The article he wrote wound up as a featured article in the Hillsborough County section of the Tampa Bay Times. It's always news when something happens to your neighbors that make you think, wow, this could happen to me. Second, we were contacted by a candidate for Temple Terrace City Council. This candidate heard of our situation, felt it was not right, and promised action if they were elected. I know this is a campaign promise, but it's definitely worth serious consideration. Lastly, there's an age-old tale. It involves minority people and people in protected classes who own prime real estate. Our half-acre lots sit 30 feet above the river, therefore are not in a flood zone. They are very desirable real estate. Gentrification always starts with actions and policies that drive down property values. There is no way anyone can convince me that this sober house will have a positive effect on our beautiful neighborhood and make our homes worth more. Deputy City Attorney Ernesto Mueller claims that in the Times article that these requests are in the minority. I say to all the residents and voters of Temple Terrace that what is rare often becomes commonplace once a precedent has been set. So I ask the government, what's going on here? What are you going to allow to happen in this sober house? What controls are you going to put in place so that my neighbors and I concerns will be a priority? We were here long before them. Your actions going forward will affect all of us for a very long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCourty.
Good, I just got that in.
Just perfect timing. Yes, sir. Mr. Loeb. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Charles Loeb. I live in Terrace Park, and I want to bring up several subjects. First of all, I want to talk about briefly about the Hart board meeting. I want people to know that the Hart is much more solvent than it was. However, it's on about a 75% level to what it was before COVID. What I have been trying to do is going through, aside from getting them routes and things like that, is to try to diversify their funding sources. As a matter of fact, the consultant, I walked over to the hotel, I walked back to the hotel, she said to me to keep on them, but I just wonder how much I can keep on them going for 3 minutes each at a time. But, I think maybe I have some success, maybe not, but again, that remains to be seen as time goes on. They will be having some plans coming up over for the new year and over the course of time that you will be seeing about as time comes. That's number one. Number two, I have an idea for the centennial thing specifically for May 3rd, 2025, that I want to test on both on you all and on the public. I was thinking about the idea of a time capsule. So you could bury things maybe for 21, 25 that we have around here. Or if you're real optimistic, maybe have for 29, 25 for the city's 1,000th year, if you want to be very optimistic about it. Back at home, I do have something that I gave over to the library another copy of that I think would be very, very nice for a time capsule, and that is from the TBT back in October 2016, which has a picture of the whole universe from the Hubble telescope. The the galaxies, they look like little spots and dots on it. It has a great big picture of the whole universe. And if anybody wondered back, or 100 years in the future, wondered when that occurred, when the universe was first seen on one picture, that was when it was, back in the fall of 2016. And finally, of course, speaking of the library, because I gave one copy to it, of course, obviously, one of the reasons I want to come up here and mention is about the sale in about a week and a half, starting Thursday, July 25th, to Saturday, July 27th, from 10 to 4 a.m., 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the library. If people want to get some books or DVDs or whatever they have, sometimes you see long playing records and a few other things that they have nice. It's going to be Thursday. I'm going to repeat it again. Thursday at 10 a.m., July 25th. That's about slightly less than a week and a half away, to Friday and Saturday, July 26th and July 27th, over at the library. And you might be able to find a real bargain and help them raise some money. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Loeb. Ladies, I saw you picked up public comment forms. Are you here to address an item on the agenda or an item not on the agenda? Okay, well, you're welcome, and I'm going to call on you to come up unless it's a specific item that we're going to have a hearing on or something.
I think she just got the agenda.
Oh, you have the agenda. You didn't pick up, so you don't want to address the council. Sure. Well, welcome. Just, we do ask for your name and city of residence at the beginning.
My name's Mika Zylstra. I live right across the street over there, Victoria Terrace. And
I'm sorry, what's your name again?
yeah, it's,
Nina?
no, Mieke. You want my last name? There's probably only one in Temple Terrace. I was born here, actually. And no, I moved here when I was in second grade. At any rate, moved away and came back. But I'm just kind of curious about the recycling program. If there is like one main hub for recycling, or if it's up to each. Because at the townhouses, we don't have, curbside recycling like they do at residential addresses. So I was wondering if the city has like a recycling program. That was only the question.
We do, ma'am. If you'll leave your contact information with the city clerk, we will have a member of our staff contact you and answer all your questions about that.
Okay, great.
We'd be happy to.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other public comment on items not on the agenda? Okay, very well. Next item is a request for continuance regarding a second public hearing and second reading of ordinance 1567, amending Chapter 12 of the code to change the terms of Board of Adjustment members. And I will open the public hearing, and our Deputy City Attorney, Ernie Mueller, is here to explain. Welcome, Mr. Mueller.
Thank you. Yeah, if you recall, we had first reading on this 2 weeks ago. And in that time, we talked with the Planning Commission, and it was decided in an abundance of caution, since it's in Chapter 12, that we should run it through the Planning Commission, get their approval, or their finding that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. We're on their calendar for July 29th, so we'd like to continue this to the August 6th meeting.
Okay, are there members of the public that wish to comment on this item?
And I'm sorry, Mayor, did you open up the public hearing?
I did.
on this?
Yes, I did. Council questions, comments?
I do.
Councilmember Fernandez.
My only concern would be, I thought we were working with a deadline here. So does this still give us enough time for this to come back before us to get the terms
Yes.
recertified?
One of the things that the present ordinance or city code does is it keeps the members in their positions until a replacement is found or they're reappointed. So we won't have too bad of a problem there. I think I can't remember exactly the date that they expire, but either way, we're gonna be fine.
Okay.
Councilmember Chambers.
I have a question of you, Mayor. I know you'd mentioned that you wanted to attend the next BOA meeting, which is the July 30th. You can still do that and explain the program, just it's not voted on. Is that-
Correct.
Okay.
That's
okay.
my intent, yes.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Schisler.
When we did this ordinance, did we have to go before the planning commission for that?
I don't know if we did or did not at that time when we redid it. And like I said, we had just a discussion with the planning commission this time. It's because it's located in chapter 12, which is our land development code, and we just decided this time, in abundance of caution, we would go ahead and put it through.
Feels a little bizarre that we have to go to them for that.
Understand?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Is there a motion?
Move to continue till
August 6th.
The August 6th.
August 6th.
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No nays. Continuance is granted. Thank you, Mr. Mueller.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Next item is the second public hearing and second reading of ordinance 1566, adopting a rezoning of folio number 03734-0000 with an address of 10024 Davis Road and unknown address folio number 037531-5000. I will open the public hearing and ask anyone who intends to speak on this matter to please stand and be sworn in by the city clerk.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Ms. Shoshone, would you please poll the council for ex parte communication?
At this time, if any council member has participated in or received any ex parte communication regarding this matter, please state what that is now. If you received anything in writing, a copy of that needs to be provided to the clerk as soon as possible. And any communication, whether written or oral, needs to be reported at this time. I'll start with Councilmember Fernandez, and please state if you have had such communication, with whom that communication took place, when it took place, and what was the sum and substance of that communication.
I don't have any communication that hasn't already been included in our packet in previous meetings.
The same for me.
Same for me.
Same.
Same.
Thank you.
Good, thank you, Ms. Shoshone. All right, our city planner, Miranda Anaya, is here to explain. Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Okay, this is the second reading and second public hearing of RZP 2302. This is an area of the subject property which consists of two parcels. At the March 19, 2024 hearing, the southern parcel was annexed into the city, and a comprehensive plan amendment was approved from a Hillsborough County designation to the Temple Terrace R9 future land use district. The subject property is approximately 6.7 acres and is located within the Temple Terrace utility service area. The northern parcel is 2.4 acres and has a zoning of R7 Temple Terrace, and the southern parcel is 4.18 acres and has a zoning of agricultural single-family conventional ACS1 Hillsborough County. The applicant is requesting to change the zoning of the subject property to PD plan development for 28 single-family detached homes. These photos are looking north, south, and east on Davis Road from the subject property. Here's a snapshot of the zoning categories and properties in the surrounding area that are located within Temple Terrace. In the dark purple, bluish color, those are zoned PD. So changing the zoning to PD for the subject property would be compatible to the surrounding area. Here's a survey of the property submitted by the applicant. The existing structures will be removed if this project is approved. And I won't go into full detail about the original master plan, But this was the master plan that was presented at the March 5th hearing that contained 32 single-family lots. And this is the new master plan submitted June 6, 2024. The new master plan proposes 28 lots, 26 of them being at least 50 foot wide. The general proposed lot size is 5,500 square feet, 50 by 110. The plan also includes removal of the park, adding parking spaces around the mail kiosks, and relocation of the lift station. The submittal also includes an updated letter from the traffic engineer, elevations and floor plans, and new bulk standards. Here are the bulk standards versus the R7 district. As you know, the PD standards are based off the closest zoning district. However, the purpose of a PD is to allow for a negotiation. Standard single-family lots less than 70 feet have to be proposed through the PD process. The applicant is proposing deviations from lot area and width. The applicant is also requesting a deviation from front yard setbacks, maximum building coverage, and maximum lot coverage. Staff is in general support of the project but has an objection to the maximum lot coverage. The applicant originally proposed a lot coverage of 60% with the caveat that poles do not count towards that lot coverage. But at the last council hearing on June 18th, there was concerns about permitting without a maximum percentage. And so the applicant proposed 69%. Staff can support a maximum lot coverage of 60% in its entirety. Over 60% for a single-family detached is not at all supported by staff. All single-family zoning districts in the city have a maximum lot coverage of 47.5%. The Land Development Code states accessory structures, including pools and decks, shall not exceed the total lot coverage. One of the most powerful tools to measure intensity of land uses is lot coverage. 60% is the maximum coverage for one of our multifamily districts, and 70% plus is usually allowed for commercial, industrial, and other non-residential uses. And in my professional opinion, I have not encountered an applicant proposing as high as 69% for a single-family lot. There are limits of development according to land use. The applicant is also proposing the building envelope as the building coverage, and based on the elevation submitted last time, the building footprint is smaller than the proposed building coverage. At the last meeting, the city engineers, since the last meeting, the city engineer submitted information on possible conditions relating to pervious materials and drainage, which I will present momentarily. At the last hearing, the applicant proposed two models. One at 2,400 square feet of living area and the other at 2,900, and this one is the 2,400. And I won't go in full detail like I did the last time, but this is the 2,400, and I'll move to the 2,900 square foot. And since the last hearing, the applicant is seeking not to be bound by those elevations, and has proposed a new condition, which I'll read out loud. Each lot shall include a minimum of 3 architectural features. Features can include 2 separate materials: stucco, siding, brick, sorry, I came out smudged. I'll read that again. Each lot shall include a minimum of 3 architectural features. Features can include 2 separate materials: stucco, siding, brick, stone, dentils, cornices, trim, divisions of lights within windows, porches, porticos, dormers, oriental or decorative garage doors, ornaments such as medallions, shutters, and coach lights, etc. And so I did rewrite condition number 5 to allow slight flexibility from these elevations that you see on the screen, but they would have to appear substantially similar to those elevations. It's up to City Council on how to proceed. Elevations are required for every PD, so you can keep staff's conditions in the ordinance, or you can swap out condition number 5 with the applicant's proposed condition. If you continue with the applicant's proposed condition, then at time of permitting, the elevations may change, and what you see on the screen may not be what is built for the project. Moving on to the suggested conditions. Along with the elevations, condition number 1 states 28 single-family detached dwellings. It did not specify 1-story or 2-story, and the applicant has told me that they're now seeking maybe a 1-story house. So if you were to remove staff's conditions and implement the applicant's proposed condition, then by this condition number 1 will allow for that. Proposed condition number 2, for permitting purposes, staff added that if the 69% is approved for pools, that pool decking and pool safety barriers are included. Also, there was a report from the city engineer, and it appears that the applicant submitted a detail with calculations, and it shows that there is a smaller pool option, which indicates 69% is not needed for a pool. And the applicant's last submittal, 51% was proposed for building coverage, and the detail in the city engineer's report shows it a bit higher than that, so the applicant will need to clarify. Condition 3 and 4 remain the same from the last hearing. Condition 5 is staff's revised condition regarding the elevations. Condition 6 is the new condition. The applicant is seeking a deviation for parking spots. Anything over 4 bedrooms requires 5 parking spaces. So the applicant is seeking 4 spaces. Staff has no concern with that. Condition number 7 remains the same. Condition 8 through 12 also remain the same. This slide is about possible additional conditions. So to add to the ordinance, condition number 5 is on the screen. The top one is staff's condition, and the bottom one is the applicant's condition. So you can either keep staff's or swap out the applicant's. Condition number 13, 14, and 50 are taken from the engineering report that was shared with the applicant. If you have further questions regarding these conditions, I would refer to the city engineer for those, but I will read those out loud. The proposed development must construct stormwater infrastructure to capture any runoff from the western side of Davis Road and Elmdale Place intersection. Infrastructure improvements can include ditches, inlets, pipes, curbing, and grading to ensure no stormwater ponding when entering the proposed development. And I think that was in response to public comment from the last hearing and when staff went out on the site. Proposed condition number 14 is regarding the pervious materials. All residential driveways must meet pervious materials as outlined in LDC section 12-921. In the city engineer's report, he did list pros and cons regarding pervious materials for the driveways. And so if council wants to have the development require pervious materials, this would be the condition we would add into the ordinance. Proposed condition number 15, the developer must create a private drainage easement between lot grading type A on the southern side of the proposed development and the adjacent southern parcel, or as approved by the engineering division. It's from my understanding that it's to protect if pools were allowed, that it would protect stormwater from going on to the adjacent southern property. The condition also says, or as approved by the engineering division, because lot grading type A may not be necessary depending on the existing conditions of the site, but it is there to allow some flexibility. And lastly, the Planning Commission recommended approval of this project. Community Development has an objection to the lot coverage exceeding 60%. Other departments in the DRC had no objections, and staff recommends City Council approve the second reading and second public hearing of an ordinance with the proposed conditions adopting RZP 2302.
Thank you, Ms. Anaya. The city engineer going to add to this, or? I'm just asking. Okay, are there members of the public who wish to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none. Council member questions? Yes, Councilmember Schisler.
I've got a few. when did it change from 32 to 28, or did I miss something along the way? And
At the last, so in March, it was the 32, and at the last meeting, I'm forgetting the
Okay,
date, a month ago,
the
too.
32 was at 40 foot, so the 28 goes to 50 foot.
Yeah,
Okay, fine, all right.
exactly.
The other question I have is in item number condition 13, if you could go back to that.
Is that at the end, Miranda?
Yes. That is, the second to last slide. And you may need the city engineer for that one, because that's 13, 14, and 15 is from his
Well,
report.
before we get off this slide, what is that curved property that goes to the west?
I believe we actually own that property.
Okay, all right.
The railway easement.
That's the,
Oh, it's a
yeah.
railway.
used to-
Okay, all right, okay, all right.
It's not letting me move it, so if you can move it.
Oh, okay.
You can go to 13. One more. How do we enforce that after the fact? How do we ensure that gets met? I don't know if you live in Temple Terrace, but Sunday afternoon's rain was quite heavy. And we had 3 inches of rain in like an hour in my neighborhood. How do we know that what is chosen, the ultimate infrastructure improvement, will be able to deal with that amount of runoff? Is there an equation that you're using, or a?
You'll look at the, Brian McCarthy, city engineer, and what the developer's engineer will do is kind of add the intersection as part of their basing calculations for their pond. So typically your roadway is going to be crowned. Drainage should be graded to the left on one side or to the west, and then to the east is on the right side. So based upon Davis Road, anything on the west side, they can incorporate that type of drainage through some type of inlet or ditch that would then flow into their pond just in front of that intersection.
Okay, so we're going to take the excess water off of Davis Road, take it into the pond, as well as all the other runoff from the other 28 properties.
From their own development, yes.
Okay. Now, I remember, this is before I got on council, there was a discussion on the ability of the infrastructure to handle a certain amount of rainfall in a time, like a 90-minute time frame. That's the relationship I'm looking for. How do we know that, how can we ensure that, I don't want to come back in a year and say, we're flooding out the place. Everybody's flooding out. How do we, are we going to verify that the calculations, are you going to go back and double check these things, or is it we're going to rely upon their engineer to handle that completely?
So they'll also need a water management district permit. They'll also be looking at the stormwater pond.
Okay, so there's another set of eyes.
There's another agency that'll also be looking at it.
Okay, that's cool. All right, good, I'm good with that. Thank you.
I did want to bring up one of the conditions. I think it was 14. All residential driveways must be pervious materials as outlined in the LDC. In our technical memo, it was more of it was, in the engineering division, we have no objection to it being pervious materials or non-pervious materials. It's up to council's discretion. It is a allowable driveway material if you would like to have that as a condition.
I don't know what you just said.
That was my question,
No.
14. My question was on 14.
So as part of our review, the city code allows for pervious materials. However, it's not a requirement to have a pervious driveway, pervious material type of driveway. So if that's something that you would like to condition as part of this, I mean, the engineering group has no objection to requiring it versus not requiring it. Does that?
Mayor, that's my question. But in the condition 14, it says all. So all of them have to be that way?
That's
That's if we apply it.
May I
Yes.
clarify this? So,
Yeah, please do.
so the, couple of things here. So I think what Mr. McCarthy is saying, but not stating clearly, but was stated in the report, is that pervious driveways are not required here. This came up in the last discussion. I believe it was actually the vice mayor that brought it up. Pervious material requires maintenance. It's not we're not requiring it. I think if you asked us, we wouldn't even suggest it necessarily because it does have maintenance, a maintenance component to it that most people are not going to do. And eventually over time, that pervious material will not work. That'll stop functioning. And so to add the cost of doing that, that's not something, that's why we said, look, it's up to you. If the council feels strongly, we're not going to object to it. But whoever is buying these homes needs to understand that they have to go through this process of basically vacuuming up their driveway. And maybe that's the homeowners association that might need to do that. And relative to the slide, so the slide, if you look at the title of the slide, it's additional possible conditions. So as the council member Fernandez mentioned, if you would like to, we're following up on a direction that was brought up at the last meeting. If you'd like to add that as a condition, then you can. But we just want to make sure that it's clear here that if you don't want it as a condition, somebody should have stated for the record, if you're going down this approval path, that you don't want that as a condition, and obviously won't be part of the record.
So we're going to have to slice and dice the conditions.
This was just additional possible, based on the last meeting.
Other questions?
Yes.
Councilmember Fernandez.
This is back to Miranda with the number 5, the one we've proposed and the one that they've proposed. So can you tell me, because one of the things that people like about Temple Terrace is that not all of our houses look identical. We have a variety of facades and shapes and floor plans and all kinds of things. And in a lot of newer construction, you don't get that. So with their proposal, so I get that we don't want necessarily to approve some sort of concept and elevation and then have someone come in and build something completely different. We've seen that happen now a couple of times. But what would be our objection to the builder's proposed number 5, which may result in some variety in the home stock? Like, how would we keep it within what the expectation is with quality, but yet allow them to have the differences in facades, I guess is what I'm asking. As from our side, from the city side. If we went with their proposed condition, number 5.
Yeah, they're proposing some architectural features. It's a minimum of 3, so it's really flexible. I think that's a question really for the applicant about the uniqueness. They might have certain models that they're thinking of and proposing. They may be able to give you more detail, but the staff condition is restricting the models that I just presented, and then also to allow slight flexibility with maybe some of the features, like the garage on the other side than what's shown in the models. But as far as uniqueness, I think that's more of a question for the applicant. I do think you can have 3 architectural features on any home.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, if we were to accept the applicant's proposed number 5 condition, what's the city's concern that accepting that versus the staff proposal?
So you wouldn't see, you might not see what's presented, the models that I presented to you. It might be 1 story, the 1 garage, instead of the two-car garages that you see. It could be different form, different color. Without those models being bound by the project, it could be any elevation, really, as long as they meet the 3 architectural features.
So from the city perspective, what we would want is to have the floor plan or the models approved in this project, along with a generic elevation, but then would we be able to tell the applicant, but you could come in, but you could present the architectural choices that you would give the customer, and that would be part of the approval process? Would that be a compromise that we could have?
So if you went with the applicant's proposal, right, I don't know if the developer is going to pick the 3 architectural features, or they're going to leave that up to the homeowner. That's something that, again, I think would be best asked by the applicant. We're
I'm
kind
asking
of walking
from the city
into,
perspective.
yeah, we're kind of, PDs do require elevations, and I have not seen an approved PD without an elevation, so we're kind of walking into unprecedented territory. So it's really a matter if city council wants to see exactly what their, what those models show, or would you be willing to allow any elevation with those 3 architectural features?
So then what we would want to see, I'm just asking from the city perspective,
Yeah.
what is going to give the city the protection that we're getting the project, if the city approves it, the project that the city approves. However, I'm also asking about how then the builder can incorporate some of the architectural or design features that they're saying that they'd want to add choices to. So would we want them to come to the city with the proposed floor plans and elevations, and maybe have the elevations that they're willing to offer to build for people, as all of them offered as part of the package that then would come in front of city council for approval?
That's specifically what the applicant does not want to do. They do not want to come back to city council for their architectural approval. If you're talking about at a staff level, we could write, something along the lines of it has to be submitted to our division before the permitting process. But again, if you wanted to see it,
Well, it's not necessarily me specifically.
not you, sorry, yes, the council.
Well, and not even, I mean, I'm not speaking for anyone here in the council, but I guess my concern is we've had a situation with a couple of projects where they've come before city council.
Right.
We've approved
Yes.
a project, and then it hasn't been built according to that approval, and what has been built has not been, it's not satisfied the intent of what city council approved originally.
Right. With removing those models, there is no point of reference for staff.
Okay.
So it'll be just those 3 architectural features and whatever elevation they can find a builder for.
So what would we need to do in order to, I'm not trying to say be flexible, but some flexibility in order to provide the guidelines for the project that gives staff a frame of reference, but also allow some flexibility for people or the builder or the home buyer to add some other features or personalize their house a little bit?
Like I said, they specifically don't want to go back to council. The only thing I can think of is if you want community development to look at it, to get their approval before it goes through the permitting process.
You know what I'm asking?
But there's no,
I think you might be asking, I apologize if I get it wrong, that if you want us to come up with some parameters? Is that what you're seeking potentially?
Well, I'm saying if we want, if in order to do this project, sorry, I'm eating candy too. In order to do this project, according to our process, we have to have elevations and the plans to be approved as part of the overall project approval. But it seems that the developer is asking to be able to do some architectural deviation from what they're proposing. So if we approve,
they may not want to do those models at all.
okay,
Maybe that's where the confusion is.
They seem to want a sort of a clean slate to be able to come
Right.
back to you. I imagine what they're trying to do, they can speak for themselves, is probably test the marketplace, see what kind of product might sell in this market, and then they'll have an idea. But right now, they're pretty early in the process, so they may not have done that legwork yet.
Okay, so then where does that leave us when we're looking at approving a project? I get that we could say yes to their condition number 5, but then we are in a situation where we have
You're not
no
gonna
idea
know
what's
gonna be built, right?
right.
That's correct.
Excuse me, I think that we should probably hear from the applicant
Yeah.
first.
Well,
They might
let's-
have the
let's-
answer to
let's-
this.
Let's make sure that we're sticking with questions and not getting into discussion at this point, but we will hear from the applicant before we enter into discussion.
That's where my main question.
Okay, we have more, but you haven't spoken yet, Vice Mayor. Would you,
I don't have any questions.
you don't have any
Just waiting for
questions?
discussion.
Okay. Councilmember Chambers.
It's about this. If this was a normal R7 development, would we have any control on what structure is being built?
The
Other than-
architectural features, no, but it's because it's a PD.
Because it's PD. Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
That was going to be my question. PD dictates that we have limited number of architectural options.
PD says you're required to submit building elevations, so they have to submit models like you see there. It doesn't detail the architectural features, it just says whatever you do submit, you're bound by that for
So
the
you'll,
project.
with the PD, you'll end up with the cookie cutter type houses. They could all be the same or very, very similar to each other.
There's a few variations in the 2 models I've shown, but yes, it would pretty much be bound by
The essentially
what
the
was
same.
approved.
Okay, the PD designation limits what can be done with that. Okay, all right.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So with the PD, and we've shown 2 models, they could submit 10 models, 20 models?
They would, can you
Subject to our
bring back
approval.
my PowerPoint?
I mean, I know there's a lot of variation in the models they submitted in terms of floor plan options.
So for example, Model 2 is 2,400 square feet, that's elevation A. And then you have the left and right elevation. And then you see there's a different variation of that same model, elevation B.
But I guess my
And then you
question
have different options
is,
for
but the
porch.
PD doesn't restrict the number of models that they submit, correct?
That's correct. They submitted what they're proposing,
Okay,
right? It
that's
didn't
all I wanted
restrict
to
it.
know.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions for Miranda?
I don't think so.
I have questions for the applicant, please. So before I ask questions, I'll give you an opportunity to speak to everything that's been said so far, if you like.
Well, I appreciate that, Council. Jeremy Couch with Tampa Civil, and I'm here representing the applicant. I'm also a professional engineer that specializes in drainage. Could we put up the conditions that were the optional? Oh, the clicker, okay. I get to drive, nice. Okay.
One more. There you go.
Great. So, Council, when we make a zoning application, the request typically is this appropriate location for a single-family subdivision with lot widths of 50 foot? That's really what we intend to ask. The code doesn't have the 50-foot option, so therefore we're defaulted into PD, and then we have to follow the PD standards. When thinking about 28 lots, and at the time of zoning, to come up with 10 elevation options is nearly impossible. I mean, the architecture costs more than the land for something like that. So what we attempted to do with this condition is to give council a guarantee that you're not going to drive through here and see homes that are nothing but stucco, no siding, no coach lights, no cornices. And so what we wanted to say is a minimum of 3 architectural features so that we can vary the looks throughout the neighborhood. And if Councilman Chambers comes and wants to buy a new home there and says, you know, he wants siding and board and batten, that option is available without rezoning. So that's really what the request is. One thing that is not in there, which we certainly would like to add, is that no garages will be less than 2 car. So that would be an option. Also, the models, if we develop a model that has a side entry garage, we can't do that without rezoning the project. And so the intent is really to have a set of guidelines that staff can follow. Staff is professional planners. They can count architectural elevations and see that we meet that standard and meet that intent, and proceed with our 28 individual permits as we ask them one by one. So that's really what we're trying to do there. You know, there may be a huge demand for 1-story models, and we don't have that in there. And so to build a 1-story home, a lot of people do not want to go upstairs. If that's an option, you know, we would have to come back and rezone. So that's really what we're trying to do. With regards to the city engineer's report, it's a great report. Brian does a great job. He went out there after a gully washer, and he pointed out that on the east side of Davis Road, opposite of ours, they have a bit of a flooding issue right there. And so really what the intent is I told him we can absolutely fix the west side of the road. There's no infrastructure. We can extend the curb out and take it in similar to the subdivision to the north. We're completely in agreement to do that and add that as a condition. We also talked about the potential for installing a drainage easement along the southern property line behind where any accessory structures would be, so that there's no sheds or anything in there. So if we need to tinker with the drainage, that there's a drainage easement to the HOA to do that. So we're in agreement with that. We don't think that pervious driveways are a good idea in a single-family community. Inside of a parking lot in a commercial site, we do it a lot. We do it to save trees. We do it to lower runoff rates. But single-family homes and HOAs that are saying, hey, pressure wash your driveway. If you had like turf block pavers and they were like, or somebody's like, well, you know, I'm going to tear it up and put gravel down. I mean, that would look awful. So I would ask the council to not adopt that. And I think that was it. Unless you have any questions of me.
Council questions? Councilmember Chambers.
I know I'm beating this one up, but just a simple yes or no. With your condition number 5, if with that condition in, could an A-frame be built?
Like an A-frame cabin?
A-frame cabin, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Council members?
I don't think we could sell it though, sir.
I know, but it could be.
Sure.
Okay.
I would be okay to preclude any type of structures like the circle huts that they build up north and igloos and anything else that and require a minimum 2-car driveway garage.
Vice Mayor?
Can we go back to the presentation and go back, I think, 2 slides? One earlier than that.
Oh, I'm supposed to drive, I'm sorry.
And one more before that. Oh gosh, one more before that, that's not the one. Okay, this is the one. So for these suggested conditions, these are from you all, right? Or is this from staff?
This is what we propose to staff and what staff has included as the condition, the lot development standard for staff to, council to approve, consider.
Okay, that's what I needed to see again, thank you, that's all. I don't have a further question.
Other questions for the applicant?
So I guess I'm back on,
Councilmember Fernandez.
sorry, I jumped in. I'm back on number 5. And the concern is, I don't want you to have to come before us to be rezoned for every every small change, but at the same time, in PD, we're trying to do some sort of cohesive plan for staff to follow that has met the expectations of council for what we think. I'm not talking about specific, I know the floor plan is, but I'm not saying what would sell in the market, but I'm saying the overall project is a valuable, it adds value to the city. So but I have zero problem with differences in architectural features.
Is there a question?
Yeah, the question is, when would you know what you want to build, and how do we reconcile the city concerns with a viable project?
Assuming the city council approved us today and we went forward, it's going to take us at least a year to obtain infrastructure permits and develop the roadway network. At that time, probably 9 months from now, we'd have an idea of what the market is looking for. Right now the trend is like modern farmhouse elevations. Everybody's excited about white homes with black shutters and trim and Dutch dormers and cool stuff like that. A hard guarantee other than what we've put in there is difficult, other than I would say this is a major investment into the city. The cost of the land and the infrastructure is a huge investment. And I don't think our end product would be anything that you are not excited about, or that would not be a good addition to the city. I understand where the PD guidelines come from. It's typically commercial projects. Somebody wants to build a nice building on a very prominent corner, and they tell you one thing, and you get a metal building with no windows. These are single-family homes, so I think in general it's different, and it should be considered different. And I'd be happy to talk. I mean, if you consider that condition, we could add, it has to be. I'm not a good lawyer at writing language, but we just don't want to like rezone every time, and staff feel like, hey, sorry, we can't approve you to add that bonus room in the back. You got to go back to city council.
Are there other questions for the applicant? Questions?
If I might, I'm sure that this developer has the greatest of intentions, but in speaking to the two conditions, they can both be approved together. If you approve only the one proposed by the developer, essentially what you can get is anything, as long as they put three of those things
Can we
on.
get to discussion before we have this?
Okay, I thought I was addressing Councilman
okay.
Fernandez's comments.
Okay.
So I understand that they may want to do the proposed elevations. They may want to do a different elevation. They could come forward to you with multiple elevations, since they're not restricted, and let you know now whether they want to, and get your approval of the two that have been presented, and maybe two or three more if the market changes and they want to build a less expensive house. But right now, if you go with only the proposed one, they could essentially build anything. So you are not really approving any particular type of a house at all. All you're approving is that it has three of those things on it. And I saw that one of them is trim, and that's so vague, I have no idea what trim would even be, or how much, or where. So that's what you're getting.
Are there other questions for the applicant? Okay. All right, thank you, sir. If there are no other questions, I will close the public hearing and ask the clerk to read the title of the ordinance, and then we'll have discussion.
An ordinance of the City of Temple Terrace, Florida, rezoning 2 parcels of land located south of East Fowler Avenue and west of Davis Road, addressed as 10024 Davis Road, and totaling 6.7 plus minus acres, lying within the unincorporated area of Hillsborough County, legally described in Exhibit A attached hereto, by changing the zoning atlas map designation on said property from zoning classification agricultural single-family conventional, ASC 1, Hillsborough County, and residential 7, R7 Temple Terrace, to Plan Development PD in Temple Terrace for RZP 23-02, providing for amendment to the official zoning atlas map of the city, providing severability, providing for correction of typographical errors, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I don't normally start the discussion, but if you'll indulge me this time, I'd like to. I think we have gone, and partially my fault, right? But I think we've gone way into the weeds on this project, and I think we need to retreat back to our own rules. I think we are way down in weeds on exceptions and things like that. We're the rule makers, right? And if we don't like the rules in the city, we don't like the ordinances, we can change them. And once they are there, we need to live by them. So let me start with the easier of the two things that I want to say. One is the exception for the architect for the elevations. I don't think that's a good idea at all. A PD zoning district requires elevations for the building. As Councilmember Fernandez pointed out, that has saved our bacon here recently a couple of times where we've said, no, you built something different than the elevations. So I think we need to stick by our PD rules that say we require elevations. Now, I don't have any objections at all. I don't know what the ordinance says. If they want to come up with more options to give them more flexibility and then come back for a revision or something like that, I would have no heartburn with that. But I think we need to know the style of the homes that are going to be built there. And I don't think we need to make an exception to the rules for that. The more complicated one is the lot coverage. And this one's kind of on me, and I accept that, and I apologize to everybody. But at our first hearing, I kind of led the charge on what's the magic about the 60% thing. And without intending to catch you off guard and do the gotcha thing, I kind of did it. And it wasn't intentional. I honestly, I do not do gotcha questions to people on purpose. I didn't think about it until the discussion. And I sprung that on our staff kind of unexpectedly, and naturally they weren't prepared for that, and kind of and then we went down the rabbit hole on the discussion of that. Well, since the first hearing, I've had more time, they've had more time. I've talked to our staff, I've read the technical memo that we've got, I've talked to our engineers, I've talked to planning commission people to say, okay, what's the downside? Remember me asking who loses if we do that? Well, there is a loser. And there's a reason we have the lot coverage rules. We have, on recommendation of our staff, extended the lot coverage beyond what the rules say, but our staff is recommending that we do so towards the greater good of this project, that it's appropriate that we wiggle a little bit. Our staff is saying, I don't recommend you wiggling any more than 60%, right? That's already wiggling a lot. You're going from 47.5% coverage to 60. That's already a big concession. Don't go any further than that. Our staff has reiterated that to us several times in writing and given, and now the engineers are to the point of talking about pervious driveway surfaces to accommodate all the runoff because we've extended the lot coverage so much. We do not want a subdivision with gravel driveways, folks. That's ridiculous. We don't want a subdivision when we don't know what the houses are going to look like. There's a reason the PD rules are the way they are. I say we take our staff's recommendation on the 60% lot coverage. We take our engineer's recommendation on the drainage easement and the construction that they have to do, whatever. We stick with normal impervious concrete driveways like every other subdivision in the city, right? We didn't do this for the new 141 home subdivision on Temple Terrace Highway. They were able to come up with elevations as required by the rules. They should too. That's my discussion. Vice Mayor.
Thank you for your comments. The lot coverage thing gave me a lot of heartburn, and I agree with you that 60% is a stretch, and we should stay within that. You seemed like you really wanted pools, though, so I was trying to like find ways to compromise so you could have your pools, but I'm right there with you on everything that you just said. I think that the 60%, our staff recommendations, are what we should adhere to, so thank you.
Councilmember Schuster.
I believe we should stick with 5. Number 5, the original number 5. I believe that we should stick with 60% on the coverage. But I do think that, but there leaves the 3 other conditions, or the 2 other conditions, 13 and 14, or 14 and 15.
You bring
The
those up?
optional conditions, do we need to address those separately? Because they're not really part of anything.
Well, they may not be relevant
Well, that's,
if we don't do,
well, 14, we don't, 14, I think we need to kill,
okay?
okay? And 15, I don't think we really care, because I think that's more of a procedure. So I think we need to go with staff's recommendations, except not 15, not 14. And not the alternate 5 and not number 14. I think 13 is important, I think 15 is important. I don't know how to word that in
Well,
there,
we'll-
you know, but
we'll
I
see what
think
they
that's
think.
that's my opinion.
Councilmember Chan?
No additional, I can support that.
Councilmember Fernandez?
With regard to the 60% versus 69%, the way I look at this, and I understand the lot coverage, but if we're willing to do the 60% lot coverage with a house, adding the pool to get to the 69% doesn't actually change, to me, the bulk of your lot, because you're still allowing the 60% for the structure. So, and I recognize that there would be maybe a pool cage or something, but I don't have as big an issue with that, because I still don't see that as being a bulky addition to the lot. And without that, we're still allowing 60% for the structure. So that, I mean, that's the way I was looking at it. And I understand staff's recommendation, but they're okay with the 60% with the structure. And I don't see the pool as being such a visual to add to the bulk of the project. But everything else you said, yes, I mean, that's what I was trying to get at with my questioning, that ultimately I'm in favor of staff's proposal for condition number 5.
My concern with the 60%, because you just largely, most of what you just said, I said 2 weeks ago. So since then, in talking to staff and planners and doing some research, I've become a little more concerned about things that didn't come up last time. And one of the things is, you know, the PD zoning district that's a sticky wicket already, because it's almost like the Wild West of zoning. It's like we put this huge burden on staff to come up with what's allowable and what's not, based on a comparison to another zoning district that is as close a comparison as we can find, but it's never the same thing. So we're always comparing the closest thing. My concern with the PD zoning district is, if we're not careful, it becomes very subjective. And I think the council since I've been on council, we've worked very hard to try to maintain some consistency, hence the push at the 50-foot lot width, because that's what we've done with some of our affordable housing projects, is over their objections, we made them do 50 feet. So we've been pretty consistent with that. We've been, as far as I know, 100% consistent with requiring elevations. I am concerned about going against staff's recommendation on this, because what comes next? Because it seems like almost anything that's got to be built in Temple Terrace has to be rezoned to PD. I don't know why that is, but we have this PD. If you want to do anything, you got to rezone as PD, and then we're left with the planners trying to figure out how that compares to R7 or commercial or whatever it is. What happens when the next one comes up and they say, well, and at that point, their recommendation is because of the characteristics of the lot, they don't recommend an expansion. They say, no, 47.5 is what it should be for single-family homes. There's no reason for an exception in this case. And then the applicant says, whoa, 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 hold on. You went to 60% plus another 9% for pool enclosures on this one. What makes mine different? So you truly are just shooting from the hip every time there's a PD that comes before you. You're making these arbitrary decisions. And I'm concerned about that scenario and us going off on this one further than we've gone before. Whereas I think up till this point, we've been fairly consistent with our PD requirements in terms of lot width and elevations and other things. If staff were recommending this for good planning world reasons, whatever those might be, because we don't understand that weird fuzzy world of planning, but if they were coming to us and said, well, because of the unique nature of this project, we're comfortable recommending that. But that's not the case. I mean, we're going against our own professional staff recommendation into uncharted territory where we've never gone before. And then I go back to, we're the governing body here. When we don't like ordinances or they need to be changed or revised because times change, we change them. We task them to come up with different ways. But when we do have rules that we passed or previous councils passed, I think we are always better served by living by those rules or changing them. And that's my response to that. And I get it. I get it.
But in this case, it's not, I mean, I see both sides, but it's not technically that we have codified the 60% in planned development or the 50, it's that it's best practices.
Well, no, the 47.5 is codified.
That's,
Yeah.
but I'm saying this, I'm looking at the 60% and saying if we're okay with the property, with the structure being 60%, whether they have a pool there or not, the structure is 60%. So I guess that's, I'm looking at the reasoning behind it differently.
I'm looking at the slippery slope is what I'm looking at. I don't think the world would crumble if they had a pool behind their houses in this subdivision, but I think we might regret this in 2 years. That's my, please.
I've mentioned how staff feels many times about the lot coverage of the 69%. But what I did want to show here is, I know you're concerned whether they'll have a pool or not, but if you read the engineer's report, looks like there's an inset that the applicant submitted, and it shows the two-story home at 51%, and that includes the building pad, pool area, driveway, and everything else. Without the pool, it's at 51% lot coverage. So they can still possibly have a small pool at 60%.
The other thing that I just thought of, thank you for that. The other thing I just thought of is we have cases that have been before the BOA on this very topic, where the BOA has adhered to our rules as they're currently written. We could very well be opening a Pandora's box here for anybody who's had who's been rejected for an increase in lot coverage because we're living with the 47.5. Well, what about them? So you told me I couldn't do it. I've lived here for 30 years. I get it. I do get it. I don't think the world would crumble if they had a pool, but I do think we're straying into an area where we may not be, we're trying to do the right thing. I get it, but I'm afraid that we're going into an area that, in my opinion. So where's that leave us? Somebody want to try to navigate a motion out of this?
I would have to see
Okay.
pull up the presentation.
I can try.
You're going to try.
I'll try.
You want this slide up?
No. We'll get correct, I'll get
Okay.
corrected.
Everybody listen carefully to make sure that we get where we're,
Okay. Move to approve second public hearing and second reading of ordinance 1566, approving a rezoning of folio number 037534-0000 with an address of 10024 Davis Road and unknown address folio number 037531-5000, approving the conditions 1 through 12 listed with the city, maximum lot coverage of 60%, and in addition, the requested number 13 and 15.
Second.
can you put those up again? 13 and, that page, 13. That's the stormwater runoff and the drainage easement. Okay. We capture it? Were you listening? It sounded good to me.
So you want to staff's condition number 5?
Yes.
And add 13 and 15.
Now, the staff, whoops, sorry.
And also,
We're discussing the motion at this point.
Okay, staff originally.
Wait, do we get a second?
Yes, I'm second.
Okay, go ahead.
The staff, number 5, no, I'm sorry, go back to the other, the list of all the conditions. Is that what I want to go back to?
Yes.
Keep going back, that one. Do we need to modify that maximum lot coverage?
His motion did that.
yes.
How did it do it?
It said
Maximum
60%.
You said 60%, okay, all right, yes, okay, all right, good. I'll make sure we covered that. Okay, yeah,
Max
And-
of 60%, and then keep condition number 5 as is, and
Correct.
then add 13 and 15.
correct.
That is your intent. That
My
is your second.
Yes.
Discussion of the motion.
She was wondering if it needs to clarify that that means with a pool up to 60%.
With normal footprint of the building and approved accessory structures.
Well, lot coverage.
Lot coverage.
Lot coverage is lot coverage. Okay, discussion of the motion. If not, all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no nays. Okay, ordinance is adopted on second reading. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, scheduling a special meeting to adopt the tentative millage rate under council business. It's recommended that the council schedule a special meeting to adopt the tentative millage rate on Tuesday, July the 30th, 2024 at 5 p.m. in the council chambers.
Move to schedule.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion?
That's the 30th, correct?
Yes. Just for the public's edification, that meeting on July 30th, if we vote here and it passes, we will set the tentative millage rate for the next fiscal year. We cannot go any higher than that rate. We can go lower if during the budget process it becomes apparent we need to go lower, but this would be the cap, okay? So, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed? No nays? All right, we're good with our, any other carryover council business? Seeing none, new business or board reports. Vice Mayor.
I have a question that occurred to me during the discussion today, and I don't really need an answer now, but I got curious about what type of planning we might be making into our code to account for climate change. Like, for example, the 90-minute rain events that we experience that are causing, increased pooling of water. And I'm wondering, it's probably a planning question or an engineering question, is what kind of thought are we putting into the future with that kind of stuff in mind? You don't have to answer now, but it's just something I'm thinking about.
Sea level rise, a few years ago, Florida statute put in that local government should have some language regarding sea level rise, and it should be implemented in the comprehensive plan. I'm not too familiar with the language in there, but I can look into that and let you know.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Other new business, Board Councilmember Fernandez.
I just have the Cultural Assets Committee that is part of the Hillsborough County Commission that awards grants to events that happen to be culturally significant or increase community involvement in the arts or culture or mostly arts and culture. If you have a project that's going on and you think that you would like to see if those grants are viable for you, you would go on the Hillsborough County website, and that's where the grant applications are, and the grants, those will be opening very soon. So now would be the time to apply.
Good, thank you. Other new business, board reports. Yes,
Yes.
Councilmember Chambers.
Mr. Lowe brought up two things. One, the library book sale. That is done by the Friends of the Library. That's the support group. So the book sale are the ones that are donated all year. So that's for the Friends organization that raise money and that supports the library. The second thing, he mentioned the time capsule, and I know the Centennial Committee has talked about that, and I have personally volunteered to help open that in 100 years. So anyway, just to let you know on that. But also on the city's community art, public art project, the railings are up in the hallway. They were put up this week. Thank you to Public Works, wherever Jason went, but thank you for getting those up. Also, a very extensive document has been created. Thank you to our Deputy Attorney Ernie Mueller and Arts Council member Nancy Kirkpatrick and the city manager for working on this document to protect the city and the artists that'll be displaying their work. That all calls going out now that the railings are up to
Nancy
get.
Hudson?
No, Nancy Kirkpatrick.
Just checking.
And we have two Nancys, but that's Kirkpatrick's going to be the curator of this project for the city. Also, the other part of it is the street mural that we're proposing. I've talked to the city manager. The city's come up with some also other alternative intersections that they're exploring to give to us. And this item will be on the August 6th agenda to talk about, but there's more than just a couple intersections. They've been doing some extensive work on background on pavement. You know, we don't want to put a mural on something that'll be repaved in a year or something. So thank you for that work, and that'll be on the agenda for us to decide on that.
Very good, thank you.
That's it.
Other new business, board reports. I do want to say something. I want to give the public, I know there's a few of you here, but there's also people watching. I want to give a little budget update for those of you, particularly in light of there's an article in the Beacon. It's a good article. It talks about some of the things that are in our upcoming budget on page 2, and it's entitled "Workshops Reveal Plenty on the City's Plate," and it goes into detailing a lot of some of the projects that we have, not even all of them, and some really good stuff going on in Temple Terrace right now. We have a lot of things going on. A lot of building projects, a lot of investments, really across the city, but in our downtown area, a lot of investments in the EOC, the Utilities Administration buildings, some Parks and Rec investments, a lot of good things going on. But my concern when I read this is that the public doesn't always understand how the budget process works, and they think all government funds are the same, and they are not. There's silos of money. There's different buckets of money. And the different buckets of money can only be spent on certain things. So you might have this bucket is full and you've got plenty of money to do that, but you can't spend the money that you would save from not buying a garbage truck can't be spent on something else. It's apples and oranges. And so right now, the city is very well positioned in terms of capital money for a variety of reasons. One is the downtown redevelopment. Some of that tax money, that TIF money, is starting to finally pay in more than what the loan payments are. That's the first time this has happened. Two is through efficiency from Mr. Bahia and our staff members going through Public Works and all of our departments and finding efficiencies. we've underspent in some of those departments, and we've got some money that can be recovered for capital. Another is the community investment tax, that we still have some residual money coming. That's the money that we use to buy police cars and fire trucks and parks equipment, playground equipment, those types of things. So the capital funds are primarily healthy right now. But the general funds, the money that you see going towards paying salaries and towards day-to-day operations, buying computers and paying the phone bill and the electricity and all that kind of stuff, that money's tight this year. We've got a estimate from the property appraiser about how much property taxes we could expect. This was an estimate we got a month or so ago, and we kind of built a budget around that estimate. And then when we got the certified copy of the real valuation, it was significantly less. And so our operating budget in the next year is very, very close to the margin. Even though you read this and you say, oh, they've got plenty of money because they're doing all these capital projects. We do have a good amount of money in capital, but that money can't be used in general. And so remember that there's different buckets of money that can only be used in those buckets. For instance, gas tax money can only be used in certain things. The street fund, the sanitation fund, there's different buckets. So I just don't want the public to read this and think, oh, they spent all this money on capital, and then 2 years from now, if we bump the millage rate up 0.5 or something, they go, oh, look, they built all this stuff they couldn't afford it, and now they have to raise taxes. Well, that's not how it works. So I do invite the public to come to our budget workshops. They're in this room. They are public meetings. They happen during the daytime. They're not exciting, but they are informative. So I do invite everybody to come, and if we can sit through it, you can sit through it. So, all right, okay. Other new business and board reports?
Comment?
Yes.
We have not, this is the first time meeting since the 4th of July celebration.
Oh, thank you.
And
Yes.
this past 4th of July, from beginning to end was incredible. Thank you to all the staff, leisure services, everybody who participated. It was just great, all the way through to the fireworks. The fireworks, I think, were the most spectacular ones I've seen in the city in forever. But I just want to, thank you. I think you guys did a phenomenal job. Again, you seem to outdo yourself every year. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to echo what Councilmember Schisler just said about and thank not only the staff, but also thank the city council for coming out to the parade and the members of the community that were there. So it was a great event, as the council member stated. And I also want to just disagree slightly with the mayor. I thought the presentation was very exciting at the budget workshop. So, I mean, just
In a geeky way.
in a geeky way.
Riveting.
Sure. It was riveting, yeah. But I have nothing else. Thank you.
City attorney.
I have nothing.
Very good. Anybody else? Directors, anything? We overlooked anything? Thank you again for all your hard work. All right, we'll be adjourned.
Chief. Ian, you got a second?